So last time we finished out painting Dave, the dwarf, starting to work on the basing, but it's time to start painting our next adventuring party mini, and that is going to be Dell. So the Reaper figure that I'm using is actually a wizard, but Dell is a cleric. But I picked this mini for a couple of reasons, primarily the hawk. Early on, Dell had adopted a hawk that one of the opponents that they were facing off had as an attacking pet. So Dell currently has a hawk. So Dell is a worshipper of Lathandar. Here I'm just touching up a couple of areas of the primer to make sure I've got a good even coat. And as a follower of Lathandar, Dell is a previous courtesan, so he worked in the high courts of Lathandar and is not super wise in the ways of the world. So just getting out of the temple and noble house service, he's got a lot to learn about the really real world, but a fun character for the buffs that he often gives the party so that they go in and keep Dell out of danger. Just working on skin tones as the primary piece, and I wanted to do the beard, but got a little sidetracked as I was working on the miniature. I was thinking about the player for Dell, the cleric, and ways that I could incorporate some of his personality into the miniature. Just doing fairly light skin tones because I figured Dell would constantly have been inside as much as possible, working with the interior, not out in the sun, not out doing any type of religious laboring in the gardens or anything like that, but really that courtesan background of announcing people as they came to court and just really in the noble household. So a very light skin triad that I'm going to be doing with a medium wash. And I'm also going to be working a little bit on the interior of the cloak. So as we lay down a good even coating of fair skin, then I'll give it a wash of a medium brown wash. And while it's drying, start working on some of the cloak elements. Again, because this is for tabletop use, I'm not going into super heavy details in the face and hands. It's just going to be a triad with a highlight and a darker wash. So this is the wash that's going on here. You can see the base of the mini is yellow. Of course, for all of the players, I ask them what their favorite color is, so that when we're in just the primer stage, I can paint the base and they can make them out on the maps as we're playing. So yellow is the player's favorite color, and actually kind of ties into a worshipper of Lathandar kind of well. So here I'm going to start putting in some colors on the inside of the cloak, and I know it blurs out because of the position of my hand, but I'm starting with just a pretty deep purple, and I'm letting it edge down just into the primer. And this is a fairly thin coat, but not a wash. This is an actual paint. And then next I'm going to start blending in a midnight blue right into the purple. So it'll have kind of a twilight effect. And as that skin tone starts drying, I'll start building up highlight layers. And one of the fun things about Dell is as he buffs the party and picks the closest person to hide behind so he stays out of trouble, as they were fighting a wraith in one of the adventures, Dell actually got the killing blow with his spiritual weapon, so it was actually kind of interesting. He definitely is not going to forget that he had the killing blow on that foe. Working on some highlights here, and this is just a blend of the flesh highlight and the Caucasian skin tone. This allows us to build up from the shaded areas and the base coat into our highlights. So Dell had purchased a mount early on, and it is a giant lizard, just because he does not want to walk anywhere. So he was the first in the party to have a mount as a giant lizard. So it's kind of comical that he has a hawk that he can use to attack if he so chooses, then also a giant lizard as a mount. When the party was offered horses as a reward, he actually kept the giant lizard. So it's kind of interesting mix of mounts that the party is on. But here we're starting to put in some of the blues in the cloak. So this is going to blend in with the purple and then into the next color. Really nice. Dell, as a cleric of Lathandar, has gotten quite a bit of opportunity to use kind of the light and life features of his class in providing buffs to his party and a few occasions of healing. So really good cleric in that support role. He's not looking to get up in personal, which is why I'm using this miniature. Initially I had an armored cleric, but this one with the hawk and kind of the way that Dell is played in game, I thought this would be a fantastic way to represent Dell at the table. And I was actually hoping to be able to get a little bit further with Dell, but I'm trying to keep the amounts as watchable as possible, so I want to avoid getting these videos too long. So this week we're only going to do a little bit. We're not going to get as far as I'd hoped, but doing the flesh and then the inner coat or the inner cloak that Dell is going to be wearing, and again just giving some flesh highlights and working on the cloak as our primary painting piece. I'm going to be interested to see how the outer cloak comes. I already had an idea on how to tie in the Morning Lord colors, so making it look almost sunrise, so oranges and reds and yellows into whites. And playing on that theme, I wanted to make the inner cloak tie into the almost ombre color that I'm going to use on the outer cloak, but bring it in a little bit more full circle. So after the blues, we're going to go in and put in some greens next. But on the skin tone, now just focusing more and more on higher areas. So really picking out the fingers and the cheekbones and nose and a little bit of the lip. Now the miniature does have a beard that will be painted in, but we're just focusing on the higher areas of flesh. So we can paint over that, and then when we paint the beard in, it'll clean it all up. And similar with the cloak interior, as we paint the pants and shirt the next week, any messes we make on the pants and shirt and boots will get cleaned up. But just moving from one area to the next, nice thin paints layering on top of each other. And the campaign that the party is in actually has, as part of the overarching story arc, some religious ties to it. So having a cleric and a paladin, of course you've already seen Jaw, the paladin, be painted, but they're going to have some good opportunity for their characters' features to be highlighted in pretty exciting ways if they follow the main story arc. And if not, it's no big deal because we've got an open world with lots that they can explore. But here we are just continuing to paint into Dell, the cleric of Lathandar. And again, just keeping real nice, thin, even coats of paint and picking out the highest areas that are going to have the best effect for capturing light, and really trying to keep good, decent blends. And I know it's hard to see in there, but the skin tones, because there are only two shades and then lighter and darker washes and highlights, they blend in pretty well. Now we'll let all of that dry, and as that's drying, we're going to keep moving on to the cloak area. And here again, I wanted to play off the colors that we'll be using in the back of the cloak, on the outer area of the cloak. So checking out the eyes, and they look pretty decent, so we'll keep painting those. After we get the black part dry, we can go through and paint somewhere else so that it has a chance to set up. If we try to paint our ivory over top of that, then we would just take out the black. For painting the eyes, I just use black right over the skin tone. Because I use a wet palette, I can go back in with the skin tone and clean it up if I need to. But just a straight pure black. And then I use ivory over the black for the white of the eyes. I don't like using pure white, and it just doesn't look right. Here we're doing a green that's blending into the blue. And then we'll blend this down into a yellow, so from a dark green to a lighter green. And this sculpture is a little bit challenging, the way the head is turned kind of in line with both the arms on either end. I know it's for molding purposes, but it actually makes some of the hollows behind the legs and at the face and in the front sleeve where he's holding the staff a little challenging to get to, but fantastic Reaper sculpt. It really has a lot of good detail. When we get into painting some of the detail pieces, you'll be able to see them a little bit more. Here we're just laying in some yellow green to blend into the yellow, or to the green, and just using a wet palette so that we can keep those nice and moist and blend them as smooth as possible. And I'm not going for a super heavy detail or super heavy layers to have almost vanishing point blending, because we're going to be using this on the tabletop. But because it's a gift for a player, I still want to do a good job, so I've actually sped up the video. I'm not actually painting this fast. That's just so we can keep the videos at a decent length. There goes in a stripe of yellow. I'm just going to wet blend these into the greens above, and then that'll thin the lower level so that as I use an orange yellow next, they'll blend pretty well together. But going from purple to blue to green to yellow to an orange yellow will be kind of like the sunset, or maybe even a rainbow for the outer cloak, which is going to be the fiery colors of Lathandar. I think it'll play in pretty good. And now we'll go through and work on detailing a little bit more in the eyes. I know it's hard to see. The angles again are a little more challenging. This is just laying in an ivory right on top of the black after I made sure the black had plenty of time to dry, so that I don't smear it or make mud or tear the paint away from the miniature. And one of the eyes I actually have a little bit challenge. I don't get it to the bottom the way I want to. There's no black at the very bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and recover it with black, and then we'll do ivory and then put on a dark gray pupil. So eyes, of course, a little bit more challenging. Take your time, don't rush, and make sure everything is nice and dry beforehand. But the right eye I'm happy with. His left eye, I want to start from scratch and do it over. And while that's drying, we can go through and build up another little coat, another layer of our color palette. Laying in this inner cloak is going to be good because the pants and tunic that we focus on next will have a good background for us to see how they sit, and we won't have to mess up the pants and tunic by painting the inner cloak. So a little kind of a funky order that we're painting this in, but it'll all make sense. So for Dell having that noble background, they currently are on a northern frontier kind of wildlands that has a higher population of renegades, rebels, and rogues, we'll say. And it's been interesting to see how the party has kind of navigated around, and they're starting to see how their reputation and what their actions are leading the local populace to think of them. It's definitely Dell's mission to be thought of as really highly and representative of the faith of Lathandar, and of course believing as a noble that everybody should know who he is, the great deeds he does, and of course that he is the most pious person of Lathandar. So it's kind of interesting when some of the NPCs kind of pay him no mind or have to ask him to elaborate on who he is and what he does. It's really good role play. The player who's playing Dell is fantastic at some of the role play, which I really like. Interacting with the other characters as well as NPCs, a lot of fun. Dell is a fun character to see interact with the game world. And just checking the eyes, making sure they're nice and even and looking straight. One of the challenges with miniature eyes is if you don't pay attention to where you're dropping in the corneas or irises, they can be cross-eyed or looking in two different ways, look like they have a lazy eye, which isn't detrimental, but it's always nice to have eyes that are nice and even. So I try to pay good attention on making sure the eyes are looking in one direction. That way, as I gift them to the players, it's one more thing for them to kind of notice and hope that they enjoy that it's not a haphazard paint job. And getting really close to what I think we're going to call done here. This is again just the first part of painting Dell, getting him his flesh tones, and while we're doing the flesh and face, doing a bit of the inner cloak as well. But looking good. We'll jump into it next time with his clothing. So we'll see you next week. Hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching our video. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was enlightening and informative. Here's another video we think you may enjoy. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to help us grow. Remember, we launch new videos every week to try to help you answer the question of where will your adventures take you.